Hello, welcome to our channel. Today we're stepping 800 years into the past to answer a question many of you have asked. What was it really like to be a medieval princess? Forget the fairy tales with glass slippers and charming princes. The life of a medieval princess was a complex mix of privilege, duty, politics, and, believe it or not, surprisingly rigid expectations. So grab your imaginary crown and let's find out. Our story begins the moment a princess is born. The arrival of a royal daughter was always cause for celebration, but also for strategic planning. Unlike sons, who were seen as future warriors and heirs to the throne, daughters were viewed as valuable political tools. From the very beginning, a princess' life was intertwined with politics. Nobles from neighboring kingdoms would already be considering her as a potential bride. Her parents, kings, queens, or dukes, would hold councils to decide how her marriage could strengthen alliances, secure treaties, or even expand their territories. A princess' early years were spent in a wardrobe, a part of the castle reserved for noblewomen. She would be surrounded by wet nurses, ladies-in-waiting, and tutors. Because her lineage was pure, her upbringing had to be flawless. She learned from a very young age that she represented her family. So, what did a typical day look like for a medieval princess? A princess usually rose before the sun. Servants would draw her a bath in a wooden tub filled with warm water scented with lavender. She would be assisted by her maids of honor who helped her into her undergarments, a linen shift, and then a heavily embroidered gown made of wool, silk, or even velvet. Noblewomen wore hoops called farthingales to give their skirts shape, and their hair was styled with gold combs and ribbons. After dressing, a light breakfast of bread, porridge, and perhaps some wine was served. Princesses did not eat alone. Meals were social events, attended by ladies-in-waiting, and sometimes even visiting diplomats. Following breakfast came education. A princess was expected to be as learned as a noble knight. Her teachers, often priests or scholars, taught her to read and write in Latin, French, and sometimes Greek. She studied history, philosophy, theology, and music. She learned to play the lute or the harp because a princess who could not make music was considered uncultured. But her education wasn't only academic. She was taught etiquette, how to curtsy, how to speak in public, how to dine with foreign royalty, and how to dance. Dancing was essential, especially the minuet and Basque dance, because it was seen as a way to build relationships. The afternoon was often devoted to domestic duties. Unlike commoners, a princess didn't clean or cook, but she oversaw the running of her household. She had a steward and a chamberlain, and she would meet with them to discuss supplies, servants, and the management of her personal estates. In many cases, a princess owned her own lands and collected rents. She could even sit in court to settle minor disputes among her tenants. As the sun set, the castle came alive. Torches were lit, and the great hall would fill with the sounds of feasts. A princess had to be present at these events, not just to eat, but to represent her family. She would sit at the high table, listen to troubadours recite poems, and watch knights perform jousts or tournaments in her honor. Socializing was part of her job. She had to remember names, flatter visiting lords, and negotiate subtle political messages through conversation. But don't be fooled by the pageantry. Every smile, every gesture was calculated. A princess never knew when she might accidentally offend a powerful ally. A princess's education went far beyond books. She was trained to be a diplomat. From the age of 12 or 13, she would begin to attend councils alongside her parents. She learned to read political maps, understand treaties, and even draft letters to foreign monarchs. One of the most important lessons was discretion. A princess could not gossip. Everything she said could be used against her family. Because of this, many princesses developed a sharp sense of humor and used clever wordplay to convey messages without openly saying them. And let's not forget, she was constantly under scrutiny. Her behavior was reported to her parents. A single misstep, a fit of temper, a refusal to speak to an important guest could have consequences that affected her family's reputation for years. Now, the biggest part of a princess's life, marriage. For a medieval princess, marriage was never about love. It was a transaction. Typically, arrangements began when she was as young as 9 or 10. Nobles from other regions would send proposals, often accompanied by offers of land, money, or military support. Her parents would negotiate the terms, dowry, inheritance, and future alliances, without ever asking the princess for her opinion. Imagine being told at the age of 12 that you would marry a man you've never met, possibly thousands of miles away. That was the reality. Once the contract was signed, the bride would travel to her new home. The journey could take weeks, through forests, over mountains, and often under threat from bandits. Upon arrival, she would be presented to her new family, and if all went well, the wedding ceremony would follow. Take Eleanor of Aquitaine as a real example. In the 12th century, at age 15, Eleanor was married to King Louis Roman VII of France. When the marriage was annulled 12 years later, she was immediately married off to Henry Plantagenet, who later became Henry II of England. Eleanor's marriages shaped the political map of Europe. For a medieval princess, the transition to a new court could be overwhelming. She had to learn new languages, customs, and court rituals, all while producing heirs as quickly as possible. Failure to bear children, especially sons, could lead to her being sent back to her family or, worse, being cast aside. Despite the restrictions, many princesses wielded surprising influence. When their husbands were at war, princesses often acted as regents. They governed kingdoms, signed treaties, and commanded armies in their husband's absence. A perfect example is Isabella of France, who, after the death of her husband King Edward II of England, ruled as regent for her young son, Edward III. She crushed rebellions and even led troops into battle. So while a princess might not have carried a sword, she carried power. Her word could make or break a kingdom. Now, what about personal freedoms? Could a princess go wherever she pleased? The answer is no. A princess was always accompanied by a retinue of ladies-in-waiting and guards. She could not leave the castle grounds without permission. Even within the castle, her movements were monitored. Her letters were often opened by advisors to prevent secret plots. However, this didn't mean her life was joyless. In private moments with her ladies, she would read poetry, sew elaborate embroidery, and share secrets. Many princesses kept diaries, hidden under floorboards or behind tapestries, where they wrote about their hopes, fears, and even romances. Yes, even in the Middle Ages, princesses dreamed of love and adventure. Let's meet a few real medieval princesses whose stories still inspire us. Eleanor of Aquitaine, as mentioned earlier, Eleanor ruled vast territories in France and England. She was a patron of the arts and traveled with a court of poets and philosophers. Another princess is Joan of Castile, known as the Brave. Joan fought against her brother's attempts to disinherit her. She eventually became Queen of Navarre and ruled with wisdom. Next is Anna of Bohemia, a 14th century princess who corresponded with some of Europe's greatest scholars. Her letters survive today and give us a rare glimpse into the intellect of medieval women. These women show that a princess could be far more than a political pawn. She could be a leader, a scholar, and a survivor. So, what was it like to be a medieval princess? It was a life of contradictions. She lived in luxury, surrounded by art, music, and fine foods. She managed estates, influenced politics, and secured alliances. Her freedom was limited, and her most important decision, whom to marry, was never hers. Yet countless princesses used the platform given to them to shape history. They were diplomats, regents, and, occasionally, rebels. If you could trade places with a medieval princess for a day, would you accept? Would you endure the political marriages and the constant scrutiny for the chance to live in a world of castles and courtly love? Thank you for joining us on this royal journey. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel for more history content, and click the bell so you never miss an episode. What other historical figures would you like us to explore? Let us know in the comments below.